Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Politics and Media Show with me, Salma Yaqub. On tonight's show, we'll be discussing two different but perhaps related issues. In part 2, 10 years after the 9/11 attacks, we'll be assessing the impact of 9/11 on British Muslims. In the first half, though, we'll be reflecting on Saturday's protests in East London. Last week, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, banned the English Defence League from holding a planned march through Tower Hamlets. She imposed a ban on marching in 6 London boroughs after a request from the Metropolitan Police. But the far-right group went ahead with a static protest instead, although the supporters could only gather in nearby Aldgate. It was countered by a larger protest by Unite Against Fascism. But before I introduce our guests, let's take a quick look at Saturday's protests.
The planned English Defence League protest in Tower Hamlets had been described as a provocation by anti-fascist campaigners. In the event, the EDL were unable to protest on Whitechapel Road in the heart of the East London borough. The EDL says it's protesting against Islamic extremism in the UK and has held other marches which have often resulted in violent confrontations with local Muslim communities. But a banning order by the Home Secretary had ensured that they weren't allowed to march through one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse areas in the country. Instead, in their place, thousands of anti-fascists, trade unionists and members of the local community protested in Whitechapel Road, just yards from the East London Mosque.
We've come out today because we think that it's very highly provocative for the English Defence League, who say things like Allah is a paedophile, burn down a mosque, to threaten to come to an area or near an area like Tower Hamlets, with the biggest concentration of Muslim communities in the whole country, and it's a very multicultural and diverse borough. We, as United East End and Unite Against Fascism, are saying that if fascists threaten to come to your area, they want to spread fear and intimidation, you shouldn't concede to that by staying at home. You have to come out, go about your normal business, and it's right to politically voice opposition to what they're doing and celebrate our multicultural and diverse communities and show that we, the majority of people in society, like our diverse and multicultural society, and we won't let people like the EDL divide us.
And there was evidence of that diversity on show, with members of several communities intent on showing solidarity with Muslims and local residents.
In the first instance, we're here to show solidarity with the Muslim community who have been victims of the English Defence League. But the English Defence League's hatred and violence is not limited just to the Muslim community. It extends to all black and minority ethnic groups and also trade unions as well. They've been a real threat in my hometown of Redbridge and also in the east parts of London. They have also consistently tried to misrepresent the Sikh community by playing on old history between our communities.
Well, I've come down from Cambridge with a coachload of people. The EDL tried to march in our city about a month ago. We had a demonstration of 2,000 against them. And I thought it's important to show solidarity to people in Tower Hamlets, because obviously this is one of the most diverse regions in the country. And I think it's important that everyone comes down to support, celebrate their unity and stop the EDL marching around here. We can't have their racist poison in this community, can we?
Well, I think it's important because we need to show our support, and as a Muslim, as a community, that we're all united and we're not scared of EDL or anything like that, or racism, fascism or anything like that, and they're not especially welcome in the East London.
Unite Against Fascism, who organised the protest, expressed their satisfaction at the turnout. They declared it a victory, but the turnout probably wasn't as high as hoped for. There had been confusion after the Home Secretary announced the banning order on all protests in 6 London boroughs the previous week. The leader of the EDL and its supporters did, however, hold their own protests, although this was in Aldgate and outside the Tower Hamlets borough boundary in East London. A concerted effort involving police, businesses and locals ensured they were unable to gather anywhere else. In total, 60 EDL supporters were arrested, including 44 who were aboard a coach which was reportedly attacked by Asian youths as it drove through Tower Hamlets. Police arrived quickly to prevent any further problems, but it was a blow for a security operation which had seen some 3,000 police deployed in the area.
Well, with me to discuss Saturday's happenings, we have in the studio with us Sabby Dhalu from Unite Against Fascism. We saw you there in that clip. Thank you and welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Bob Lambert, who's the co-director of the European Muslim Research Centre at Exeter University. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
We have with us in the studio Dr. Amina Yaqin, co-author of Framing Muslim-Stereotypes After 9/11. Thank you, Amina, for joining us. And last but not at all least, we have Moazzam Begg, a former Guantanamo Bay detainee and now spokesperson for Cageprisoners. Thank you for coming to the studio. We can turn to you, Sabby. Do you think it was a victory on Saturday for people saying they're against the EDL?
Definitely. I think it was a victory for two reasons. Firstly, because the English Defence League have attempted to come to Tower Hamlets on 3 occasions now, and they failed on all 3 occasions. So it's a big, it's a huge victory. And
when you say they failed, what do you mean by failed?
Because they have tried to call both static demonstrations and moving marches in the borough. In the first instance, in June 2010, they called off their demonstration. Secondly, early this year in March, they tried to come into the borough under the guise of defending lesbian and gay communities and trying to portray the large Muslim community in Tower Hamlets as somehow uniquely homophobic to any other religion or community in society. But then they were exposed as being English Defence League, and so they weren't allowed to have their demonstration. And then thirdly, their march was banned, quite rightly, by the Home Secretary and all those that, including Lutfi Rahman and other politicians that campaigned for the march to be banned. But also, I think, a big thank you and well done to Lutfi Rahman, the mayor of Tower Hamlets, because it was because of his relentless pressure on the police that they weren't actually allowed to have a static demonstration either in Tower Hamlets, because normally where their march is banned, they're then allowed to have a static protest because the police say they can't actually ban static protests. But it's only because Lutfi Rahman said, under no circumstances are they allowed in the borough that I am mayor of. And so big well done to him.
So actually that did work, and that's why
that's right.
they were forced to go to
That's right, because ultimately the police do have to listen to the large community that exists in Tower Hamlets, and if you voice your huge concerns and you put pressure on the authorities, including the police, they do have to listen. So it does work. But I think it was also a victory for a second reason, which is that there is an argument by those that campaign in favour of the ban, to say that, who I agree with on, banning EDL marches, because that would have been highly provocative for them to have a moving march through a multicultural area with a large Muslim population like Tower Hamlets. So I agree with that. But some of those people then go on to say, well, and when they do come for their static protest, you should stay at home. And I just I really disagree with that, because why should organisations and communities that oppose the English Defence League stay at home? Surely you should be telling the English Defence League to stay at home and not come to your area. People...
Well, that's been one of the ongoing issues with the marches, wherever they've been.
Exactly.
I saw you nodding there, Bob. I mean, it seems from the community point of view there was a success, but you wrote following this event, where were the MPs?
Yes, it was notable on Saturday again, and this is a trend, when you consider how close Westminster is, it would be really encouraging for local people to see national politicians, members of government, to actually come and stand shoulder to shoulder. We didn't see that, but instead...
Why do you think that is, considering so much rhetoric? I mean, we've had these riots and we've had people after people coming out openly saying we want united communities, and yet when a community is threatened in the way it has been with the EDL, there's evidence that every march has been some kind of violence outbreaking, and yet when the community is called for solidarity, we're not seeing prominent elected officials.
I think there's an equivocation, and I think that analysts in Westminster, in government, and those that advise government are acutely aware that the English Defence League is using a lot of rhetoric that comes from government itself, and so there's bound to be concern. And whereas Mayor Lutfi Rahman is comfortable sharing a platform with Sabby, with the members of Islamic Forum Europe, East London Mosque, I think for members of the government this puts them in a very, very difficult position, because they are in part responsible for the myth, for the demonisation of East London Mosque, Islamic Forum Europe, that these are extremists.